Suppose I might as well get started. Get rid of this overlay. I think I'm going to keep the music playing,
which is funny.
I probably should not do that. But it gets really boring just sitting here in the silence, you know? I kind of like having the music play. Let's move these down, shall we? Can I do both? Let's try. Yes, I can. I can do both, which is awesome. Should I be as big? No. I should fit in the camera, though. Currently, I do not. Oh. Try not to get any barbecue sauce on Yoda here. I feel like the camera setup's different. Can't see how. Some of the settings change every time Miriam and I switch off. It seems to be to me. Okay, now, when we last left off, I had finished the opening stuff about this book, and then went immediately into... Can I mute that? Whatever. Went immediately into the thing. Stardew Valley. With no ceremony at all, so it was actually very difficult in that enormous video to find the point to cut off where that had happened. Which was weird. So, we're going to start talking about this now. The general rules. So there are a few things that are really important to know. About Dungeons & Dragons before I go forth. This is mostly for YouTube, because Matt's the only person in the chat. And Matt's had to hear this shit ad nauseum at this point, I'm sure. But basically, what the system for Dungeons & Dragons, that is to say the D20 system, is, or the framework represented by D20 systems in a game like this, is a D20 roll added to something. The something is generated by various things, and the D20 roll is generated by, well, a D20. But it can also be replaced by 10, because 10 is the median for the D20. And this would be the average of the rolls. The mean generated by rolling a D20 over and over again. So, the design sits around this idea, right? That you have this D20 or 10 plus some number. And usually the 10 is because you're generating a static number that's always the same, that is challenged by a player rolling a D20. It doesn't always work that way. There are caveats and stuff. But the way that I like to do it, I prefer to have the players roll as often as possible, because players like rolling dice. And players love getting a critical success, and players love laughing and crying over critical failures. So, no wonder. The D20 system is therefore sort of like this frame around which the rest of the game winds up being built, this idea. And then you decide when you're going to have a 10 or a bonus and what generates that bonus. So for the example of armor class, which tends to be what's called a passive defense, right? That's a passive defense because you're taking 10. What armor class is taking 10. And then you add the bonuses on top of the 10 that you take rather than rolling a d20. And then in order to attack, you roll a d20 and add the bonus in the hopes that the combination of the d20 and the bonus is higher than the taking 10 and the bonus for the armor class, right? The armor class is a difficulty class. Difficulty class is the thing that you're trying to use the d20 roll to overcome or to meet, because meets beats in 5th edition, for example. In my system, there are caveats to meeting the DC and succeeding. But that's mostly the way I play it. They're not written into the rules. One of the reasons I'm doing this also is because I've come to find that doing this sort of thing makes me more likely to find errors than just reading through my materials. So doing this live, especially when people might come into the Discord to ask questions, or ask questions in chat, assuming that I see them. Moderated hopefully by Matt, who is forgivably not paying attention right now because there's nobody here to moderate. So what's he supposed to do? Moderate oxygen? You know, there's nobody. So, moving forward, one of the first things we're going to talk about here, I'm going to skip actions for a moment and go to the Aid Another rule. Because Aid Another, group skills, and the group skill feature were all different things. In fact, in the current version, this PDF is the current version you can get from the DM's Guild, right? So it currently says that Aid Another is this very simple rule in this one section, and that the group skill checks is a completely unrelated rule, which is not true. Because the group skill check is the Aid Another rule, basically. And then the group skill feature is another element of this, which is also not involved, right, on this screen, on the version you can download from the DM's Guild. But in the current edit, the rule looks like this, and they're all put together. I did not edit this properly last time. I will do that this time. And then it'll be easier to understand. It should work in this case at a glance. No. Wrong. Sort of? Yeah, there we go. Why did that happen? No, I don't. I do not understand. I do not understand why it isn't working. What if I do this? No, that won't work. What does Shift Tab do? It ruins my day. Whatever. This is close enough. Now, we're gonna go here. And that should be on the table. So if I make the PDF disappear, then it should appear, rather than, for example, pictures of my ex-girlfriends in their underwear. Maybe it's worked? Huh? How has it failed? It's frozen in time. Boy, that was fucking strange. Okay. Anyway, here you go. So, what it said originally was, when you aid another, you make the same skill check that the subject does. At least one of you must be trained in the skill, unless extenuating circumstances reasonably apply. Whichever roll is the highest is used for the skill check, and whichever subject has the highest bonus applies that bonus. The assistance must be possible. Now, that is all well and good. But, the group skill checks, the group skill features, and examples were all nowhere to be found. Alright. Honey barbecue in my mustache. Now my face is delicious. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome. You are in the Discord audio voice, but you are not watching the stream.
I am watching the stream right now.
Then where did Matt go?
It says there's 4 people watching.
Yeah, it just changed just now. Well done. You are victorious, Shreya. I overdid it with this barbecue sauce, but you know what I did wrong? It'll be better next time, but still. Also the cocktail. Although I don't know how long. I could work on this for years and not get this recipe right. It tastes great, but it's basically a flat soda that's 20% alcohol. Which is, drinkable, but it would have been a lot better had that high density carbon thing worked out. Well, not high density carbon. I'm not drinking a diamond. I mean high density carbonation. Don't drink diamonds. Anyhow, so the changes here are extremely important. This needs to be understood because the way it was before, there are, like, for example, Goliaths have the group skill feature for athletics, and they're like, what do I do with this? Do I eat it? I don't understand. Actually...
No, you pick up the gnome and put them on top of the thing they're trying to climb. Obviously.
Well, the answer is, it was basically the aid another skill, but it was worded in an unapproachable way. So the change makes that... excuse me. The change makes that sensible. What is this? No, don't put a comma in there. Maybe... Okay, they do have a certain point. I should capitalize it. Because it's actually a rule in the game. So it is a proper noun. And that'll make it stop being a bitch about it. In fact, that's how it's written. Didn't I Control-C, Control-V this? What? I've confused myself. Hold on. What did I just change? I capitalized...
It's hurt itself in its confusion.
Aid another... Yes, I've hurt myself in my confusion. I am the pain of my confusion. That is the essence of my being. That and alcohol. This reflects... With experience, adventures, no, it's earlier than that. Right here, the aid another rule. Yeah, not capitalized. All right, motherfucker. See what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't have known. I would not have realized that was wrong in the even in the new edit if I hadn't been doing this live, right? So here we are, and things are better, and there's audio, and it's amazing. Although there are signs that since the most recent changes that they've made in Streamlabs, Miriam and I are going to be in a constant state of wrestling with the program, and that is a problem. Alright, we'll have to see. If I have ever trusted anybody in my life to use a computer program, it is Miriam. It is Miriam and James, and those are like the only 2 people. Maybe me on a good day. Maybe me. But only if I'm really into figuring out how the program works, instead of rolling my eyes and playing Skyrim instead or whatever it is. Anyway, so yeah. What it says now, though, compared to that tiny little snippet I said before, when you aid another, you make the same skill check as the subject does. At least one of you must be trained in the skill, unless extenuating circumstances reasonably apply. Whichever roll is the highest is used for the skill check, and whichever subject has the highest bonus applies that bonus. The assistance must be possible, not rendered infeasible by circumstances, such as a tied-up person trying to help with an athletics skill check to swim. Should I say trying to aid another? I know that's pedantic, but... Using aid another with an athletics check to swim. Okay.
I mean, if you're asking my opinion, I come from Pathfinder, so you should be exactly as pedantic as you can be in order to prevent rules lawyering. Or, make it worse.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for rules lawyering. There should be a rules lawyer at every table, as long as they are willing, when the command decision is made, to acquiesce to the dungeon master, and they're helping other people to learn the rules rather than trying to impose their way of playing the game onto other people. Like, it's a very thin line, right? Like, look at Codeman. Codeman is definitely a rules lawyer, but he doesn't go around forcing other people to play the game the way that he thinks it should be played, right? And that's an easy mistake to make, because if you are thinking like Codeman was thinking when he first started with the Lampedition in terms of damage output, well, damage output's all well and good, but in as tactical a game as I run, you can have all the damage output in the universe and not even get to the enemy, because the rock paper scissors is going to drill your ass into the ground. Whereas if Codeman had been trying to force other people to maximize their damage output, rather than, having somebody that could help keep Kaz up, because Kaz, due to powers beyond Codeman's control, was a glass cannon, but also melee. Glass sword? Glass ceiling? Codeman is not the glass ceiling.
He could be if he wanted to.
No. I'm through with the glass ceiling. It's bullshit. I am very much anti-glass ceiling. Yeah,
That's why Miriam is your general manager?
Miriam is my general manager because she does the fucking job. Like, again, all the people I've ever met in my life, it's pretty much me, Miriam, some of the researchers I've worked with, but they don't play, despite my best efforts. I don't know. I haven't really tried that hard lately to get, like, Jeff or Michelle in, but that's because I would humiliate them under the current circumstances. Like yesterday's debacle. It's been a rough week. Besides, they're out there saving the world from racism right now.
Which is a very, very good thing to do.
Yeah, they're doing fantastically, whereas I feel impudent under the circumstances. All I was able to do was to make a YouTube video, and they banned it, because apparently science is against the terms and conditions of YouTube these days. Motherfuckers. That's a stream for another time. Probably when Dave's back from sabbatical. Anyhow, so that helps, right? We have the Aid Another system set up now, so that people are going to be like, oh yeah, this is how it works. Because the funny thing is, it's one of the simpler rules in the game, but something about it doesn't sit right with players, or doesn't like sink in very well. And I think it has to do, I think a lot of the problems with the way that we play Dungeons and Dragons, regardless of the way the rules are written, comes from normalized rugged individualism. It comes from street level neoliberalism, because people think to themselves, this is about me doing something, with what I've been given in order to tilde meritocracy and all that shit. When that's not true. It doesn't matter how good your character is. There's 4 other people in that group. And if you can't work with them, then there's no point in having you there, right? These people need to be working together in order to accomplish things. This rule represents that. This rule also means that even though every character has the right to shine, they don't have the right to shine alone, right? That's something that I think we don't get a lot of. Because you you hear advice for dungeon masters all the time on YouTube videos and on forums and shit like that. Forums, what is this, 95? What do they call them these days?
Blogs?
Well, blogs for sure, but blogs have been around the whole time. But I'm thinking of things like, I guess there's still technically forums on Roll20 and the DM's Guild and all that stuff, but I don't think of them as forums. Anyhow, probably because they work and they're not filled with the word first and everything except the first post. But Eight Another, in this case, is about, like, two characters in what is generally, you know, it's commonly a life or death struggle. But these two characters who are going to be these battle brothers who have been through this shit together and whose lives have depended on one another in the past, who both specialize in the same field, working together within that field for the good of the party. That's something that this role represents right here, that this rule represents. I think it's one of the reasons I take it so seriously and push it so hard. That and it also, and I haven't mentioned it here, but I thought about it. It counters skill roll dogpiling, because skill roll dogpiling pisses me off. And so did the way that you, Sheree, in particular, started playing, where you had to roll a perception every 10 minutes without being bidden to do so. And then I'm just like, I can't handle this. And then I would say, okay, so there's, I don't know, a sky. And you're like, perception check, 13. And then you roll the perception checks. Everybody else at the table's like, oh shit, we're rolling perception checks. And everybody rolls. And I've got 14 different numbers, which is ridiculous because there's probably only 5 players. But since somebody rolled something, somebody else was like, well, I'm not very good at that. I'll roll it anyway. Oh, but I'm good at this. I'll roll that. And I'm like, I don't even know what people are rolling now. I said there's a sky. I didn't even describe the sky yet. And people are arguing over the results of their rolls and who's better at what and who would win in a fight. And I'm just standing here going, oh my god.
So the
this
thing is, characters that I do that with tend to be the sort of characters who would be, you know, constantly looking. Like Belfort, who is natural. Well, I'm not sure if natural is the right term, but he's a paranoid son of a bitch.
Rad, yeah.
Well,
Rad does all kinds of random shit. Like, that doesn't even begin to describe Rad. Although, having Rad around is going to make us all better at rolling with the punches. Because you can search the globe for some of the weirdest out there players, and you might find one or two of the things Rad does. I don't think we appreciate Rad. We don't understand. We do not understand how eldritch Rad is. Rad's mind is not wired like a human brain. He is a golden gift from the gods. And we must learn how to use that to our advantage in order to become the greatest dungeon masters of all time, which we may very well do if we can survive his craziness. But yeah, this stops skill roll dogpiling. That's a big part of what this is about, even though I haven't brought that up. I think I bring it up earlier in the sections I've already presented in live streams, in a live stream. But the thing is here, like, it takes a problem, right, and turns it into a benefit. That's something they teach in conflict management courses too. I've been bringing that up a lot lately, doing this stuff. But I think that a lot of Dungeons & Dragons is actually just poor communication leading to conflict, rather than playing the damn game. And there's a lot of people that don't know the difference, and that's fine, as long as it's fun for them. Because there are definitely people out there that prefer that kind of game, where everybody's at everybody else's throat all the time. But anyhow, the Eight Another thing is about, like I was saying, getting the group to work together in this way that can replace the issues. And then on top of that, there's group skill checks, which is the Eight Another rule replacing skill dogpiling. Pretty much. That's just all that is. There's only 2 rolls count. The Eight Another is as many rolls as the group gets to have, because not everybody in the group represents themselves within the group to the extent that I need a check on everything, except in very particular extenuating circumstances. Like, I might have everybody roll a perception for some reason that has to do with something being personalized to each of the individuals. Like, Fey magic might do something weird like that. but usually I wouldn't. Usually I'll default to the group skill check rule. What it says verbatim right now is when the entire group would be rolling a skill such as perception, stealth, or endurance to do something together, it is often impractical to have everyone in the party roll independently and then work it all out. Instead, the check works by having the party member with the best bonus affected by the aid another rule. So whoever it is... Now, the way that this is written, it is literally impossible for people to fuck it up. That's not how I've been running it. How I've been running it is, if some idiot rolls a check their character's not very good at, they fuck the party. And I police it that way, too. And it's a bit rough, but I think it's better to put a group in that position than it is to try to force them to understand it in terms of a rule, rather than as a cost to the party. Because on the one hand, it's like, yes, this is literally how we play the game. This is specifically what the rules say. Rules as written means we behave in this manner. Whereas the other is like, the way that you are acting is socially inappropriate, and we are going to police that socially inappropriate behavior because you have done something that is is deleterious to the group. And so one of those is more effective as a means of communication than the other. Unless people are particularly interested in learning the rules, which most people really aren't. Which is fair. I mean, most people are playing a game to play the game. They're not playing the game to learn the game. Some people want to learn the game. I definitely want to learn a game. I'd rather play it, you know. Even if I were a programmer, I would get more fun from playing Skyrim than reading the code. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. The group skill feature gives the person who is rolling the group skill check advantage. That's all the more complicated it is. So people are going to do aid another when it's group endurance and it's the person who has group skill endurance, then, or group skill feature endurance, they're going to roll with advantage. And the other person who is aiding another, who should probably be the one with the next best bonus, though that doesn't really matter because the highest bonus is the only one that works. I think that's another reason why I worded it this way, is to make the people who are best at it still be the ones who are supposed to be doing it according to the rules. Anyway, that gives you the best of 3 rolls instead of the best of 2. It's the only way in Lampedition, rules as written, a person can get better than advantage. Well, beyond advantage and a bonus, because you can throw all kinds of numbers into places. I recently made a change somewhere where there was a 5, and I made that advantage, because mathematically, advantage is supposed to be similar to 5. The question that comes up there, and this is where I found out I was muted last time, that made me so mad, because it was a brilliant insight, and I explained it very, very well, and I can already tell that there are words slipping out of my head right now, and I'm not going to be able to remember quite how to put it. But the way that works is it comes down to the question, always with advantage, it comes down to the question, should the possible result be higher / the possible minimum be higher? Or should they have a better chance of succeeding / rolling a critical success / lower chance of rolling a critical failure? In a lot of ways, advantage is better. But if the maximum isn't supposed to be enough, then a +5 bonus makes a very big difference there. Because now suddenly there's a possibility above the cap beyond just a natural 20, even if the natural 20 is going to be an automatic success, which a lot of Dungeon Masters don't do. I didn't used to do it. I've been doing it lately just because it's easier. And if a natural 20 wouldn't have succeeded, why am I letting them roll? I should just tell them they failed. It wastes time to have people throwing around dice, especially because what a dice is chance. It's a person engaging with chance. That's why these games, it's a big part of why these games are popular. You don't actually know what's going to happen until you throw the bones, motherfucker. Until that thing lands, you don't know what it's going to be. And the result of that thing decides what happens. Not just me. That's one of the reasons why I've been doing most of Nostria right now is the result of random encounter rolls. Like, whole quest lines and whole characters have been rolled up in response to random encounter rolls and me trying to figure out what that means under the circumstances. you know. But if you're having somebody engage in that, and they'll fail regardless of what they roll, that kind of sucks. I mean, they won't know if they roll a 3 and then accept that they would have lost, right? But it can really take away from the game to have somebody roll a natural 20 and be like, you failed anyway. So I don't let them roll. Anyway, I got a little ahead of myself there, but that's fine. What it says verbatim is, some characters gain the group skill feature, such as group stealth for the scout, or road spawn halfling archetype. This means they can roll for the check for the whole party with advantage when using the aid another rule for the party. This reflects how some people are able to guide others with their experience. Adventurers often know how to work together. They can be trusted to rely on the expert in the party. Okay. Then we go down to combat advantage, which as near as I can tell is still verbatim. You cannot see that because I still have this on, or I should say off. Combat advantage. Wow, it's already scrolled to the right place at all. Weird. Okay, you have combat advantage on creatures under certain conditions. On creatures? Combat advantage? You have advantage on them? Over them? Combat advantage over? No, fuck it, I don't care. Syntax can kiss the fattest part of my hairy ass. You have advantage on the attack roll. You have combat advantage if you are standing and the creature is prone, if the creature is flanked by you and an ally, or if it is unaware of your presence, such as attacking from stealth and when they are surprised. Okay, I have changed this because there's an element missing there. I don't know if you can spot it. Matt, try and see if you can spot it. It'll take him a while for the stream to catch up to him though. So Sharaya, what do you think? What do you see is immediately missing in one of those claims?
Advantage on the attack roll. Combat advantage if you are standing and the creature is prone. The creature is flanked by you or an ally, or if it is unaware of your presence, such as attacking.
It's easy to miss. I missed it for 4 versions of this book. But it's pretty serious. It's pretty important.
My first thought is feints.
Well,
but I'm not sure if anyone you do does feints.
That's not okay. So, Dungeons and Dragons. This is something really important too to understand about Dungeons and Dragons game design and the design of similar games. Dungeons and Dragons is a game of exceptions. What that means is, when you're playing this game, there is a very basic set of rules at the bottom. And built upon that basic bottom set of rules, which is mostly what we're going through right now, are a series of exceptions. What a class, what a race, well, race to a lesser extent, background to a lesser extent, but what you're getting from your character class levels are basically exceptions to these rules. Something about what you're getting or doing changes the way that your character interacts with this system of rules in a way that benefits you and or the party. And that's what the game really is about selecting, in my case selecting, in their case earning, your exceptions to the rules. What makes you different? What makes you special? How are you getting away with the crazy shit adventurers do in a world bound by these constraints? Right? That's mostly what the game's about. And that works on a number of levels, right? Because, first of all, you should all be dead. None of your characters should survive any of this shit. By reasonably speaking, being a professional adventurer is a fucking stupid choice, and you should be dead. But when you don't die, you get ludicrously wealthy, and players have a tendency to not die. You are already an exception to the rule. Your characters are exceptions in the world in which they live as well, right? Because you're not even going to become an adventurer unless you're an exception to the rule. And I'm getting meta as fuck right now, but that's how it works. There's like 3 or 4 levels of this statement being true about Dungeons and Dragons in particular. But as a game of exceptions, when you take a feat, the feint feat, for example, the feint feat specifically builds something on top of the structure of the rules. Your character is capable of doing something that the rules do not otherwise allow because of the feat that you took, making you an exception to these rules. But there is something missing in this description that is extremely important. But I'm still waiting for Matt's answer. Oh, I didn't do my Japanese lesson. Damn it. I wish there were more
the
people.
problem is the playing what's missing game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
That's what I was. That's how I managed to do this. That's how I managed to have 4 versions of this book and still not find it.
So, like, my first thought was, fainting. My second thought was high ground. My third thought, my second thought is high ground. My third thought is what happens when you're prone but you have cover.
That's very close to the answer. And the only reason I'm not going to answer it is because the next 2 sections probably will. But you're on the right track when you're looking at something being flanked or being prone. I'll give you one more try.
What if they're tied up?
Well, I had 4 tries, so you get at least 2 more. And I'll take tied up as one of them, although... So, tied up... I wouldn't mention tied up because I would say that it would be up to the dungeon master to decide that a person who's tied up can't defend themselves. Hell, that might even be covered in fucking coup de grace coming up here before too much longer, as opposed to the combat advantage rule. But I would definitely give somebody advantage on the attack roll for a tied up person. But your answer in that case is a Pathfinder answer, because in Pathfinder they would say something like any time that you are subject to losing your dodge bonus to armor class, and then you'd have to look up what the dodge bonus to armor class was in another part of the book. And
but just because you're tied up doesn't mean you should lose your dex to AC. However, it will throw off your center because you can't use your arms.
I've done that. It's like, would this deny the thing? And it's even an example of when it would deny the thing in the description of the thing, but I broke the chair free that I was tied to, and they didn't know that it wasn't stuck to the floor anymore. And then when they came up, I kicked the chair over. And then I did that whole thing like they do in the movies when you're fighting somebody even though you're tied to a chair, with the chair you're tied to. It was hilarious.
Nice.
I was not very strong. I don't remember how I won. I think I might have been rescued by an NPC. I was just being chased around with a chair on my back, and they couldn't attack me through the chair because the chair was too much cover. It was hilarious. It was a very Benny Hill kind of moment. It was Keystone Cops, but the cops were Dark Elves. You've got to be a fucking fantastic.
Cops are bastards. All Dark Elves are bastards.
Yes. You've got to be a real motherfucker if you're turning Dark Elves into Keystone Cops, though, because unlike a lot of police, like the ones that just got in trouble for tackling and breaking the wrist on the wrong suspect, on the person who was not a suspect because they hadn't been paying attention. I mean, who accidentally breaks somebody's wrist not paying attention? I mean, you're not very good at your job. I've worked countless hours and I've never broken the wrong person's wrist. But I digress. So, the answer is, well, I did say you had one more. Because, like I said, I had 4 chances and I didn't catch it until the 5th. So you deserve at least as many. Matt would still have 4 coming to him, but he's not talking to us.
That's the thing. You have all sorts of, hints that it has to do with being prone, and there has to be about exceptions. I don't know if it's like an exception.
Do you get advantage on an attack if the target is prone? Do you? Is that true? I can think of instances where that wasn't the case.
Okay. Hilariously, I actually kind of sort of know the IRL answer to this, and it's yes unless you have specific training, aka a feat.
Well...
Ground fighting. I know the ground fighting stance.
I'm shit
at it.
That's not a bad answer. But that does also fit with exception, right? That does fit with the thing about it being an exception rather than the rule. The answer is the missing word here. The missing word is melee. In fact, if you attack a prone target with a ranged weapon, you have disadvantage.
Yep.
Not advantage. That statement is wrong. You see? 4 times I went through and I didn't catch it. That's why. And yet it's so important. People take cover. You dive down, get down. That's the action movie trope is get down. And we have, if you get down, you're easier to shoot. Rules is written. That's nonsense. And I've never executed it that way. So, now it says you have combat advantage on creatures under certain conditions. You have advantage on the attack roll. You have combat advantage with melee attacks if you are standing and the target is prone. If the creature is flanked by you and an ally, or if it is unaware of your presence, such as attacking from stealth or while they are surprised. Now, the reason why I was harping on this and wanted to put so much attention on it is actually because it belies the way we really play these games. Because the mistake that Pathfinder in 3rd edition made was assuming that writing rules mattered. But writing rules is only a very small part of what happens, and reading rules is an even smaller part. Because the rules, the way that they are written, become a framework upon which a social structure is built. The rules to Dungeons and Dragons, by and large, are socially constructed. They're not actually the rules that have been written, which are, to some extent, socially constructed themselves. But things get really weird when you start codifying stuff and writing it down. And still call it socially constructed. Because language is socially constructed. How can you write anything down that's not socially constructed? And yet, because it's written down...
Society made it.
The idea of shirts is a social construction, to be sure. But the point I'm trying to make here is that because that's the case, because these games are played due to the way people think about these games, not because of the way the rules are written necessarily, we all knew that if you were shooting at a creature that was prone, you had disadvantage. We all knew if they were shooting at us, that they were shooting at you, and you got prone, they had disadvantage on the attacks. But the rules never said it. If they didn't say it. If they did say it, they didn't say it here. Right?
So what's amusing is if you combine, the original wording with the concealment wording, that means if someone ducks and covers into total concealment, the person has a -5 penalty on both the rolls they have for advantage. And that's hilarious.
That's the one I replaced with disadvantage, by the way.
So concealment gives you disadvantage now?
Yes, but it has to be possible to hit them. And there's a lot of things that cannot hit somebody if you have total concealment. Oh, there's another person watching. Poor bastard. Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up, though, because that means that we can move on. So we're going to look at concealment now. Concealment attacks against a creature with concealment are at a -2 circumstance penalty. This is caused by a difficulty in seeing the target due to things like thick fog, impenetrable darkness, smoke, and other things. A character with total concealment is not visible, and thus the attacker has no line of sight on them. A blast or burst in its vicinity will still affect it, though it cannot be the point of origin. This has been a problem for Matt, because Galithar will be in a situation where he's like, well, I'd like to cast a spell there so that I can hit as many people as possible. But he can't see that spot. So he has to cast it on a spot he can see, which means that if he gets the maximum number of baddies, he's also going to hit an ally. And then we have to figure out if that's going to be worth it or not. And then if it's a burst, I'd nerf it because they're too big. I should have been a lot more careful when I wrote them in the first place. The bursts are huge. I was actually looking at that the other day because Cody was making an argument at one point about the burst attack having the potential to hit more people, but not necessarily hitting more people, which is a good point. But at the same time, when I did the math, it targets more than 3 times as many spaces.
Yeah.
It targets almost exactly 3 times as many spaces, maybe slightly less. But it's like, that's
Typically,
ridiculous.
Approximately 3.14 times as many spaces.
Yeah, what the fuck? That's too many spaces. Nerf it. Knock the die down. That's huge. It's too big. Especially if it is non-friendly fire. That's the thing that really got me about that spell. It's like, it's totally fucking enormous, and it only targets enemies. That is awesome. It's one of those things where it's like, anybody that's not taking that spell is an idiot. So I was like, okay, maybe we gotta at least tone down the dive in, because that's too much. If there is a correct answer when taking spells, there's a problem with the spell. Or it's Fireball in 5th edition because they did it on purpose. Don't get me started. I can neither attack nor accept it. So attacks against a totally concealed creature have a -5 penalty even when they are possible. Concealment from non-environment sources, such as a power or spell, stacks with concealment from environment sources and becomes total concealment. There are powers in the game that rely on this mechanic, and I hadn't written it until the, I think, 3rd revision. And I was like, well, I should probably tell somebody. Because they won't know what those powers are for. But there are ways of combining it to do all kinds of stuff. Like, if you look at cover, a character in cover has a +2 defense from ranged attacks. So you can combine cover and concealment. And I had somebody build a Sphyrfneblin ninja that did that. So they had a +2, everybody else had a -2, and under the right circumstances, they could become totally concealed and couldn't be directly targeted by things anymore for a brief period. And that was a really cool build. And they didn't get to do much with it, unfortunately, because of circumstances beyond my control, at least, if not beyond theirs. Whoa. Okay. Concealment. Yeah, because we had combat advantage. So we talked about concealment, or combat advantage, so we're not going to look at it. It's basically one word that was changed. But we are going to look at concealment, because I think concealment could be a little more important. And this is another one of those things where I wound up defaulting to the 5th edition solution, because the 5th edition, a lot of 5th edition is really good, and it is the right way to do things. And I hadn't thought of it right. Well, not really. And I was still looking at numerical bonuses in a very 3rd edition way. And I'd been holding on to it through 4th edition without realizing how detrimental it could be under those circumstances. No, turn, window catch drop. Okay. Why is it not quite right? Okay, concealment. Attacks against a character with concealment are at a -2 circumstance penalty. This is caused by a difficulty in seeing the target due to things like thick fog, impenetrable darkness, smoke, or similar things. A character with total concealment is not visible, and thus no attacker has line of sight on them. A blast or burst in its vicinity will still affect it, though it cannot be the origin point. I should probably say origin space? No, it's fine. Attacks against a totally concealed creature have disadvantage even when they are possible. Concealment from a non-environmental source, such as a power or spell, stacks with concealment from environmental sources and becomes total concealment. So, like, there was a character in the Sea Nail named Arn, who you guys never worked with again after that. But Arn was a bard who was the war drummer for the Blitzenfair. A war drummer for the Blitzenfair, and he had two combat spells, and they were both a use of fog, because fog creates concealment for a group. So the idea was, in a situation where your squad was going to be under fire or in trouble in some way, he would use the fog, which would hinder attacks against them, but also, under the right circumstances, make them specifically untargetable. Where they could not be targeted specifically or individually because they had total concealment. Which, when you're in a combat situation with large groups, that sort of thing is hugely important. Otherwise, fog is not a spell that a lot of people take seriously. All right, cover I think is still verbatim, more or less. I better turn it back on. A character in cover has a +2 to defenses from ranged attacks. A character in total cover has total concealment. Cover usually only works in one direction. It is generally provided by terrain between a target and the ranged attackers. Now, that total concealment thing is hugely important, but it also replaces a number of rules that exist in other versions of the game. I believe even 5th edition. I think even 5th edition has like partial cover and like better cover and possibly total cover versus total concealment. I'm not sure. But this replaces a lot of it. So it simplifies and streamlines the rules down as far as how cover works. And yet cover is still really advantageous. And there's still a lot of reasons to have cover. Now, I was considering having shields grant cover and have that be like how they worked. But I don't like the idea that somebody who has a shield has no reason to take cover. And I still like the idea of shields and cover stacking. And shields as they currently are add an additional bonus to reflex. The idea being that they can use the shield to reduce damage from things that would otherwise hit them and cause maximum damage if they're dodging, because the shield provides a little protection in that regard. And I think that adds a little utility to shields as well, and I like that. So that's what I've decided to stay with, even though it is perhaps a little more complicated. Not very many people play with shields anyway.
Yeah. They're kind of a pain.
They can be, yeah. Because you're in a lot of ways losing that arm, or that hand. Everybody wants... I deleted a period here by accident, apparently, at some point. Everybody wants to have a shield and use both hands, and it's just not usually how that works. But we're a long way from equipment. Alright, coup de grace. When a creature is totally helpless, cannot defend itself in any way, and you attack, it is an automatic critical hit. Now, the rest of this might end up controversial, but for the time being, I think it's what I'm sticking with. A target must immediately attempt 3 saves against death at once. If they fail 2 of these saves, then they die. Critical damage may still kill the creature anyway. That is an important note. This is similar to many death effects and powers from combat spells and monster attacks. So 2 things to note there. And that is still verbatim. Counterspell. So, we're about to embark on a very difficult journey. Counterspell has been used in a number of versions of D&D, and it's one of the things which seems to have like the widest throws on how it was executed. But I also have influences from most, if not all, of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So it was very difficult to decide how I was going to deal with counterspelling, which is kind of funny if you think about it, because hardly anybody ever does it. But if somebody was interested in doing a counterspell of some kind, or encountering spells, then I wanted to be able to facilitate their means of doing so. Even if the means of doing so that they were used to was different from what I was used to or what I had written into the game. So there's a number of ways that you can counter spells. The basic way of countering the spell is to sacrifice a prepared copy of the same spell. And you can do that as an immediate interrupt because somebody is casting a spell you already have prepared. And you can you can cancel out that spell with your version of that spell, but both of them are gone. Right? So somebody tries to cast Fireball, you have a Fireball prepared, you sacrifice your Fireball, their Fireball doesn't go off. They lose their Fireball, you lose your Fireball. But there's also the ability to, if you can ready an action before they cast their spell, you can sacrifice a higher semi-tier spell, a higher level spell, basically. A higher semi-tier spell in order to nullify their spell. So they're going to cast Fireball, you're going to cast fucking Wish. But you also
I wish that Fireball didn't hit me.
Well, that might be a better way of dealing with it under those circumstances, anyhow. But I'm only using it in this case for the example. But they're casting Fireball. You sacrifice your prepared Wish spell. When you ready an action against the spell they're going to cast, assuming that Wish is going to be a higher semi-tier than the spell they're going to cast, and being fucking correct, because Wish is the maximum, unless they're also casting something from that semi-tier, you've already succeeded. But you have to ready your action and know that they're going to cast on the next turn. So there's the downside to doing it that way. If the spell sacrifices the same spell as the target, it can be countered as an unprepared immediate interrupt. Yeah, so that's noted at the end of the new version. Oh, it is noted here in the version currently in the book. Good. All right. But you can also take counter spell practice as a feat. You can spend a higher semi-tier combat spell you have prepared to counter a lower semi-tier combat spell another caster is casting as though you were casting Dispel Magic or Remove Magic. You do this as an immediate interrupt and automatically pass the check. You can also sacrifice any prepared combat spell to counter a spell by readying an action against the caster. In this case, you must attempt a key ability casting skill against that of the caster. If you meet or exceed their skill, you succeed. So, if you have counterspell practice, and a Scion is about to cast a psionic spell, and you know that they're going to do it, and you ready an action against them, and you sacrifice fucking Burning Hands, regardless of the level of the spell that they've got, they're going to roll an endurance against your Arcana, and if you win, you've countered their spell. And if you don't, you didn't lose your Burning Hands. So you're up 1 if you win, and you're down nothing if you fail. Yeah. There's also the spell Dispel Magic, which is an arcane spell. If you cast the Dispel Magic spell... Ugh, I hate that. It makes my ears feel dirty to hear it. You make an Arcana check against the caster skill of the caster creator of the spell being cast, or an ongoing magical effect, a Dwellmare. If you succeed, the magical effect ends. This can be used to counter a spell, which means to prevent a spell being cast from coming to fruition. You must have readied an action to cast the spell at the same time as the target caster, unless you can quicken cast it as a reaction. It says somehow. Because there's the Gish gets a thing where they can do that. Some fiends can do it. I think somebody else gets it too. I'm trying to remember. Anyhow, you may sacrifice it as an immediate interrupt to succeed automatically to counter the spell. Wait, what? Yes, if you have the same spell prepared or one of a higher semi-tier, you may sacrifice it as an immediate interrupt and succeed automatically to counter the spell without the roll. Well, that's redundant, because you can do that anyway. So I don't need that sentence. Well, that's another edit I've made. That's an edit I've made to the edit. How long have we been streaming? I thought I had length on this screen. Apparently it does not. I don't know. A while. Remove magic. You cast the remove magic spell. You make a religion check against the caster check of an ongoing of the caster an ongoing magic effect. If you succeed, the magical effect ends. You have the same. If you have the same spell prepared, blah blah.